What's good, everyone? Welcome in Role Players, Episode 2. I just want to say before I get into anything, thank you so much for all the love and the praise, the likes, the comments, and support that I've received for the first episode and the launch of the show as a whole. It means everything to me. It would not be half of the product if I didn't have people supporting me. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much. Without further ado, we're going to get into Episode 2, my interview with Hailey Dougherty of the Atlanta Hawks. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Hailey Dougherty, to the podcast. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. Good morning over here in Phoenix, 10 a.m. I know you are in Atlanta right now, which I didn't realize was on East Coast time. I did not realize that.
Yeah, it is. It's nice noon here. It's a great Sunday to be recording this in the afternoon, so I appreciate you having me.
You bet. Yeah, I'm excited for this. So, just to get started, introduce yourself. Tell us what your role is and who your favorite players are.
Yeah, my name is Hailey Dougherty. I work for the Atlanta Hawks as a revenue and partnership marketing coordinator. My favorite players, it's kind of hard to narrow down to one. I mean, I think growing up, I grew up as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And I grew up in the era where our defense was crazy good. So I think I would have to go with Troy Polamalu. I think he would be my favorite player, just growing up watching him make crazy plays and be such a great human being off the field and such a great athlete on the field. He was definitely my idol. And then growing up and then kind of getting into volleyball and playing on the defensive side, that mindset, I always went back to that, watching him play. It was such a relentless mindset. He was such a hard worker, and that defense was just so crucial, and defense truly wins games. So I would probably have to say Troy Polamalu.
I love that. Giving shout outs and props to the defense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he had a great personality. And I think that's really important in football if you want to be famous and you're not a quarterback. So he like with the great hair, it was the Head and Shoulders commercials that
Yes,
just really brought him to life.
I
So
know.
that's great.
He's a great player. Just some of the craziest plays I've ever seen. And growing up watching him, I was like, yeah, he's incredible still.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, kind of moving into your role of revenue and partnerships, we're talking about brands and players. Walk me through a day to day for you right now at the Hawks. Like, what do you get into? And just kind of talk to us in the audience of what it is that you do at the Hawks.
Yeah, so in my role, I'm pretty much just a project manager for all of our marketing campaigns, specifically the revenue and partnership marketing. So pretty much anything that makes the team money. I lead and execute a lot of our marketing strategies, especially for the partnership side of things. If that's serving as a project manager and working with our creative department to get assets made for different campaigns, or working with our email and web people within the marketing department to kind of execute campaigns that way. But then also working with collecting the metrics on the back end of things to give to our partnership department to share within our external partners. Kind of seeing from strategy, execution, and then the back end of collecting all those metrics and seeing how our campaigns actually did. So far, I've been able to lead a lot of really cool campaigns. Did open practice before the season. I was able to do our all-star voting that's been happening, that ends actually yesterday. So I've been our city edition campaign with Nike. I think it's really cool partnering with such big brands that we've looked up to. So working on a lot of those big campaigns has been really awesome, and seeing the fans interact with them on social media or whatever it is. That's kind of been the day-to-day is work, collaborate with a lot of different departments, execute really big campaigns, even small little membership events to big campaigns like City Edition. They're equally all as fun and cool to work on. But yeah, that's kind of the day-to-day of what I do.
I love that. Yeah. Just so the audience knows, Hailey and I do very similar work. She is the partnership. She works in partnerships, but on the marketing side for the Hawks. I do a very similar thing for the Suns. So I was really excited to get to talk to you about your specific experience in that, since those two worlds are kind of more new. To have someone who sits on the partnership side that has a marketing background and thinks a lot about strategy. So it's not so much plug and play. It's very nuanced. It's very different. Talk to me about like one or two of the the specific strategic pathways that you've found where you didn't want to do something the way that it's always been done, but you kind of wanted to find like a different way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every campaign you have to kind of come into it, especially in our careers. Obviously, the same events usually happen year after year, but you have to spice them up every year. You have to make them different. You have to make them more fun. And so I feel like it's been a journey. I feel like schedule release is something that's really fun that all the teams get to work on. We have a partner on our schedule release, so that you kind of need to brainstorm and be creative every single year and think of something different that'll connect with your fans, but also connect with general NBA fans. I think a big one that was thought of that we probably might not execute this year was pizza box toppers. I think traditional marketing has kind of gone away a little bit with digital being so heavy now. So for All-Star voting, our partner for the Hawks is Papa John's. So kind of bringing in the partner with our campaign of All-Star voting and seeing how we can hit two of our targets together. It's just pizza box toppers. It's something that isn't really thought of or executed all the time, but could really make the difference. I think we do a really good job before season trying to introduce with trades that happen and the draft that happens. Like, you have new players on the roster every year, and so I think we do a really good job of trying to introduce those players to our fans before the season starts. We have a player campaign that we are pretty heavy on in the marketing department with out of home and email and social media. Try to get content out there during the summer when we're not playing. So I think hitting billboards and doing that and trying to get the players out to the fans before the season starts is just a really interesting way of kind of getting them invested in the team before the season even begins.
Yeah, getting players invested in what you're doing is not always the easiest thing to do. But what else is difficult is something you touched on, is finding the sweet spot in between getting a partner to align with your campaign and the kind of overall brand marketing play for the campaign itself, because you are, at the end of the day, kind of marketing the Atlanta Hawks to fans. Including a partner on that helps with revenue, but it also helps with connecting like the fans' voice. So where's that middle ground between, catering to the brand marketing play and the fans, and then also making sure that the partner is happy with the overall campaign?
Absolutely. And I kind of feel like that's my main job, is being able to manage both of those things. Like you said, I work in our marketing department, but my primary responsibility is working with our partnership department to execute the campaigns that they need to. So it's really, I feel like in my situation, I submit a lot of our requests to the creative team of the branding and the brand guidelines that we need to follow for Hawks, but also the partner and what logos to use for the partner. And I've learned a lot. I've only been in my position for about a year. So still learning a bunch every day, but kind of the sizing of logos and what slogans need to go on or what colors need to go on creative and different things like that. I feel like my job is to hear what the partnership department has to say, but make sure a lot of our branding still follows Atlanta Hawks guidelines. I think that's my main goal working for the Hawks, is to make sure all of our campaigns, all of our creative follows our guidelines, and that we incorporate partnerships the way that we're supposed to and correctly. So yeah, and then going back to partnerships and making sure those are approved and being able to kind of collaborate and work with our creative team and our partnership team to make sure everything's executed the way it's supposed to. Can definitely be a challenge, but it's a fun one.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's very similar. It's just a balancing act, making sure that everyone's happy with what you're doing. But overall, just kind of giving the fans something interesting and what they want. I mean, at the end of the day, that's who's coming to see our product are the fans. So it's really cool to be able to provide that to them. And you and I, both fans of sports, let's talk a little bit about, kind of how you got into sports. Did you have a moment where you were just like, I need to be working in sports? Like, this is where I see myself. I mean, you were a high school collegiate athlete, did that have something to play into you wanting to make it your career path? Or was there another moment that someone kind of approached you and inspired you to make your career in sports?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I played volleyball in college, so sports was a huge part of my life. I love sports. I love everything that encompasses sports. So for me, I definitely would love to work in sports. Like I said, I grew up a huge football fan. So that definitely fed into it too. Growing up in high school, I was like, I want to be an athletic trainer. I want to be a sports photographer. Like I wanted to do something in sports, but front office jobs and that area of opportunities in sports was completely unknown to me. So really in college, I had to do an internship going into my senior year for credit. And I was like, what would be the coolest internship like I would ever want to do? And I literally Googled just NFL internships. I'm like, it would be cool to work for an NFL team. Like that would be the best internship ever. And then Teamwork Online came up and I saw there's all these job listings for sports and I didn't even know they existed. So, and then that's when I got my internship with the Philadelphia Eagles for that summer going into my senior year in college. I was a fan and ticket services intern. So really answering phones and emails from fans with questions about, it was during the summer. So Eagles training camp, preseason games, but then we also held concerts. We held the NCAA D1 lacrosse tournament there. So a lot of going on. And I kind of realized like, oh, wow, there's a whole industry here that I didn't even know existed. Like this is something I really want to do. So then, yeah, I graduated in 2020 during COVID. And I was like, well, sports is kind of up in the air right now. There's not a lot of career opportunities. And so that's when I decided I was able to network with people. Someone in our athletic department at Salisbury at my undergraduate school knew the athletic director of marketing at Georgetown. I didn't really want to move back home to Pennsylvania. So I was like, you know what, I'll work as a GA in Georgetown's athletic department. And I was able to get into the master's program there for sports management. So it kind of all worked out that way. But yeah, that internship with the Eagles was, I was like, yeah, I want to work in sports. This is awesome being so close and so involved in stuff I watch on TV. That was definitely the goal. I think that's what really opened my eyes to there being a whole industry here.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's unpack that a little bit because you hit on some really great points there. So you had multiple internships. You know, with the Eagles, you worked as a student like a student at Georgetown when you were getting your master's, and at Salisbury University in your undergrad. Those experiences of working in athletic departments, which is something that I did myself, and I feel like is a really easy path when you're in school to get a taste of the sports industry, is the collegiate sports industry, which spoiler alert, we're going to talk about later, so stay tuned. Tell me about what you would tell undergraduate students or students that have graduated that are thinking about going to a secondary program for their master's degree, of like what's a piece of advice you would give them about getting those internships, because it seems like that is the only way that you can get your foot in, is by unfortunately being an unpaid intern or for school credit. So talk about the importance of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely say in my experience with applying to jobs and landing different internships, I've really found it's experience over education. I was told leaving high school it's good to go to a notable school that is not prestigious, but like that people know of. And I went to a smaller Division III school, and I really thought that would hurt me in the workplace. And I don't have a Penn State degree or anything like that. But no one really cares about your education or what degree you got or your grades, sadly enough, as much as we stressed about it in college. It is really the work experience and the skills that you have as a person. And that's what I would say, like going to Georgetown, I find in my every day-to-day career now, what I did as a GA working in their athletic department as a marketing GA has served me, and I've use those skills more than I did technically my education and my sports management master's. I think education is great. If that's something that you want to do, definitely pursue it. But a lot of teams don't necessarily require or push you to do more education. I think the experience is really where it comes in, and having an experience with the pro team and then going to a great D1 school like Georgetown and working in their athletic department that has such great sports teams. I think that's what really got my foot in the door for the Hawks over my education.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. I usually use the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But I like what you said. Can you repeat that about you were talking about education. I'm not remembering
Yeah,
exactly.
it's not so much the education or the degrees you have or your grades. It really is your experience and the
Experience
skills.
over education. That's what you said.
Experience over
Yeah,
education.
I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, networking is huge too. Like I have college students that connect with me on LinkedIn, and we have a phone call to chat about what it's like in the industry. And networking is a huge part of it. But crazy enough, I got my Eagles internship and my Hawks traineeship without networking. Like I didn't know anyone at either companies. It kind of was just luck of the draw, but it had to do with what was on my resume, with the experience that I shared on my resume and the skills that I had. So networking is huge, but I would say you kind of have to pay your dues in the sports industry and do the unpaid internships. Like you said,
Yeah.
we've both been there where you have to move or you have to do the unpaid internship. But that's what really gets your foot in the door and gets the experience on your resume.
Yeah, I love that so much because I've had so many conversations with friends about, and I have nothing against higher education.
Right.
But to your point, like there's a lot to think about when you actually get into it. I went to a bigger school, and it didn't necessarily help me or not help me. It was really about the internships that I had and the people that I was able to connect with and the experience, because that's what recruiters want to see is your experience level. So if you graduate at a prestigious university with all these accolades, you've dedicated yourself to the study of your craft, and it may even happen to be in sports. If you have a BA in sports administration or sports business or anything of the same sort, but you have no internships, no experience to back that up, it's going to hurt you. And not to scare people that may be listening to this about oh, I didn't do it right, but definitely experience and networking and getting in front of people and showing that, show me rather than tell me. Don't have it on your resume. You can do something like talk through that. Like what is it that you can do, and how have you done so? Which is hard to do when you're breaking into it, because the question I always had for myself when I was trying to get into places to work was, this job requires experience, but where am I supposed to get that experience if I can't get that entry level job? And it's internships. That's really where it's at, is internships, and definitely working while you're in school to get that experience.
Yeah, definitely using your time wisely. I mean, I was a college athlete, so I didn't have the spare time, but I brought a lot of skills from playing on a team and playing in college. But if you go to a school and you want to get into sports, definitely use your athletic department as a step up. Work in your athletic department. I wish if I didn't play sports, I definitely would have been broadcasting games and doing the live stream. Like little stuff like that definitely just gets your foot in the door, gets you that experience in the sports industry. And I would definitely say use the assets you have around you. If you go to a university, contact someone in the athletic department. Definitely do the work while you're in school, because it'll help you. It'll definitely benefit you on the back end.
Absolutely. Experience over education. I love that.
Yes.
Well, we're getting a lot into college. Let's get into the first topic that you sent over. So what I like to do with my guests, if you're new to the show, is ask them about current events that they're interested in. They come back to me with a couple ideas. We both do a little research, and then we're just going to have some really good conversation here. So is there one you would like to start with?
I guess we can start with women's sports. Let's knock that out,
Let's
because
do
I think
it. We
that's
love
the one
women's
I'm most
sports.
passionate about. Yeah.
So working for the Phoenix Suns, I have the opportunity to work with the Phoenix Mercury, and I
Oh, wow.
absolutely love that I get to do that, because I think from an outside fan's perspective, and we'll get into the numbers of like the differentiation between men's and women's sports as far as fandom and media and things like that. It is so incredible to be able to be a part of this tight-knit group of people that are really dedicated to having women's sports be more at the forefront of our fandom. Last year we got to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX, which was just huge in equality and representation in women's sports as far as legislation. It hasn't necessarily panned out in that way, which we'll get into. But yeah, let's talk about women's sports, Hailey. What do you want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic for me personally. Obviously, like I said, I was a college athlete. But before that, I mean, just like growing up and as a little girl, not seeing a bunch of women's sports being portrayed in the media, I have a little brother and it was football focused with him. It was like, yeah, let's play football. Let's do this. Let's do this. With me, it was like, what sport do you want to play? Like, I don't know, just growing up, you kind of realize that women's sports isn't super broadcasted and there isn't a lot of coverage of it. And that's been something super personal to me throughout my life. Even in college, seeing the men's teams maybe get more than the women's teams, or different treatment, or whatever the case may be taken more seriously, because that's sometimes the hardest thing ever. I actually at Georgetown finished back in May of 2022, and I wrote my capstone paper on kind of the growth of women's sports participation and media coverage, and how participation is increasing, media coverage is increasing, and that only increases with demand. But demands increase, which viewership ratings have kind of had to follow along in those trends. But just something I'm super passionate about. Like you said, Title IX last year, we celebrated 50 years of it being brought into legislation. And since that point, it has had a 900% increase within women's sports participation. Exactly. So it's done its job for the most part with bringing women's sports more accessible to female athletes and to women. But again, still a long way to go, but we are seeing increases in demand, which then is met by increased media coverage year after year for women's sports. So definitely on the way up, looking up.
900%.
Yeah.
That's
I know.
wild.
I got a couple good metrics from doing my capstone paper. The research definitely paid off.
And like, just to put that into perspective,
And that was in the 70s. Like, it wasn't very long ago.
Yeah, no, it's not. The 70s were 50 years ago. I mean, there are people in my life right now, family members, that lived in a time that women's sports were not inclusive at all, and not, didn't even exist. I mean, I think I'm older than the WNBA, and I might be dating myself there, but it is insane that sports have been around for ever. I mean, the NFL celebrated 50 something years. Baseball has been around for before the 1900s, and yet women's sports, there's just as many women as men in the world, and just as many sports fans, but the access was like a huge issue. And we're not near where we need to be, but it is just the fact that legislation, that we had to go to the highest level of our government in order for 900% increase in participation is pretty staggering.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy. I mean, an analogy that I was told while doing my research for my paper was like, it's like running a race, but the men are starting halfway across the track. Like, the women are never going to catch up. If that's the case, like without some kind of help, like without media companies purposely putting women's sports on TV, there's not going to be any way to ever catch up. So for the people who are like, well, the viewership numbers, the money, all these things that make men's sports more popular or higher demand than women's sports, like, because just there hasn't been investment into women's sports yet, and we're finally just starting to see investment, I would say, the last couple of years, with some of the things that have the NBA, the WNBA being granted so many things, with the start of Athletes Unlimited, which is a pro sports team here in the US for women, just different things like that. ESPN and ABC and NBC, like the major broadcasting companies deciding to put women's championship games and college teams on TV. Like, those are the decisions and investments that have to be made to even get close to being equal.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into a lot of that here. You talked about media coverage, and I grabbed a quick stat that was less than 10% of sports media covers women's sports. So not that women's sports aren't happening, but the coverage is why there's less fandom. I mean, fandom is what's on TV. If you can't see a sport live, or you live in a city where there are no professional sports, you rely on television or streaming to access those sports and be able to be a fan of those sports. So if they're not offered on TV, you don't even know that you're not a fan, because you don't know what is out there. Like, the media really controls what's on TV. So if it's less than 10%, that's a 90-10 split. I mean, you're talking about men starting halfway. That's like almost to the finish line if the 100% is the race. So, that's definitely staggering to hear. And then we talk about money too. There was a quote from Kelsey Plum, a WNBA player, about that the argument is not so much that women want as much money as men. They want the same percentage of that money. I think the WNBA splits 20% of the media rights, which I know the media rights are smaller, but just consider 20%, whereas the NBA splits 50%. And that's quite a difference between the two. And I'll just throw out the women's national team and how much I think the men took home this year from the World Cup more money than the women took home for winning their World Cup. Which again, just, and I don't have those numbers, but it's more. And that's regardless of what that is. It's just, if there's not investment in women's sports from a fandom perspective, that money will not increase unless, the demand increases. Going back to the very first thing you said, demand is one of the main issues. Is without demand, that money is not flowing from anywhere else.
Right. And I mean, I hear that argument all the time. Obviously, I'm a big advocate for women's sports in my personal life too. And so that's an argument I hear constantly. And the thing that people don't understand is demand is there. Like year after year after year, each women's sports, college sports is like breaking records. Like the women's basketball is breaking records. Like I do actually have some numbers here, like in 2020, the National Women's Soccer League, like you mentioned, they reported a 500% jump in television viewership, while the WNBA reported a 68% increase in viewership from like that 2020 season. So like year after year, there are increases in viewership. Like you said, it comes down to money. It comes down to profits. It's the media rights being split different for the different leagues. It's jersey sales. It's those things like that. I mean, even at the college level, you saw, what was it, a couple years ago, 2019, 2020 with the March Madness, how the men's and women's were treated completely differently with the weight rooms and the food and just the treatment of the two different just genders. It wasn't even two different sports, just the men's and the female, the basketball teams being treated so differently. I mean, it's at every level. And so it is really just investing in them. Like you said, if you don't see them on TV, you don't really know they're even existing. And I saw something when doing my paper that it's people think that because men's sports gets more coverage on TV, while women's sports gets more coverage on social media, so it equals out. And that was found to be completely false. Men's sports is just as dominant and carries more coverage on social media like it does television broadcasting. So it is really just evening out the playing field. And the big thing is changing societal perceptions about it. That's the only way we're going to see real change, is little boys respecting female athletes, their favorite NBA players respect these WNBA players. So like, you should respect them. Like there's kind of this disconnect with like female athletes not being real athletes. And that's just a perception. I think that has to change overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is, respect is a big word there. And if you don't know about this, those who are listening, go look up the weight room conditions of you said 2019, 2020, was that the year?
It was March. Yeah, it was, I think it was right before COVID or the year of COVID. The March Madness was insane.
It's shocking that it's not like they were just, they don't have dumbbells. It was a full staffed weight room with everything you could imagine for the men, and what looked to be from the picture like a broom closet or something resembling like a garage fitness center in someone's home. It was I
think it was a stack of dumbbells and a thing of yoga mats, like crazy. Shocking. Yeah, like female athletes, we squat, we deadlift, we bench, we lift weights too, like just like the men. So yeah, if anyone hasn't seen those pictures, I think it's 2019. Definitely go check them out.
Which 3 years ago, I mean, not that long ago. This was not like a long time ago. That was 4 March Madnesses ago that this is happening. This isn't an ancient, Title IX, 1970s. It's still 2019 that we're going through the same thing. So pretty wild there. Want to talk about NIL?
Yeah, let's jump into NIL.
So this one was really interesting and fun for me to research, because NIL is a space that I don't know a ton about. So I was kind of diving into some things as I don't know a ton about as far as like what's happening in the last couple of years, but the history has been very interesting. If you haven't seen the Pony Excess, which is the SMU football team getting the death penalty over some very similar things about athletes getting compensated fascinating ESPN 30 for 30 documentary. 2005, Reggie Bush gives his Heisman Trophy back because he also accepted money. But the penalties after that were pretty shocking. USC had to vacate their national championship win from 2004. They could not participate in bowl games the year of the ruling and the following, 2010 and 2011, because it was found out 5 years after he played. And they had to disassociate themselves from Reggie Bush for 10 years. They just he couldn't be on campus, couldn't be at games, alumni events. That ended in June of 2020. So just consider that, June of 2020. Whereas September 30th of 2019 was the first Fair Pay to Play Act that was signed in California, and they became the first state to pass a law allowing college athletes to be paid for their name, image, and likeness. And then since then, there's been almost half of the United States that has either signed legislation or is working on legislation for name, image, and likeness. And the NCAA, in a very similar response, this has become an NCAA bash podcast. It was not supposed to, but that's in a very similar response to what we're talking about with women's sports. The next 2 years between September 30th, 2019 and roughly June 9th of 2021, they say NIL is harmful, unconstitutional, and a threat to college sports. Their president testified before Congress, trying to keep these NIL laws from coming into play. And then finally, June 30th of the same year, 2021, so roughly a year and a half ago, on the eve of the new laws that were going to be passed in these states, the NCAA finally put an interim policy in place. And name, image, likeness has just avalanched thus far. I mean, there are, from the Popeyes kid meme, Ernest Collins, I believe his name is, I loved that meme when it happened, and he got to profit off of that now that he is a college athlete himself, which is just a great story, to entire universities giving whole offensive lines deals or whole teams deals through companies to profit off their name, image, and likeness. I mean, we talked about jerseys earlier in the podcast. That's just like the tip of the iceberg that these athletes are now able to profit from. So that's a little background and a little current, but Hailey, you were a college athlete prior to this all happening, but you were kind of still in the master's space working in college athletics as this is beginning to snowball and avalanche. So go for it. The floor is yours. Talk about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, as a college athlete, it was pre-NIL era. And so we were given the readings before a season started, no partnering with brands, no, don't even make it look like you're representing a brand. Those are things that we could all face penalty for or get in trouble for as a team or as individuals. So that was something known, but I always thought athletes should get paid for their jersey sales or whatever anything like that. But I think with influencer marketing becoming such a big thing in marketing right now, a lot of these athletes are looked at as content creators and influencers, so it's almost like a no-brainer for companies to partner with them. So I think the NIL space with the influencer marketing kind of increasing in popularity has definitely like hit the right timing with both of those, because like you said, Popeyes being able to sponsor a bunch of this kid and brands being able to reach out, like I think, what was it, Raising Cane's, like UGA just won, and Stetson Bennett like goes and he like works the drive-through window and does like different things on social media for him. Like those are things that are now possible because of NIL. And it's really just allowing students to make money off their name, image, and likeness. Like it's nothing crazy, but it is, I feel like it's benefiting all athletes. And I read something that said it's benefiting athletes that are not in high revenue sports, which is huge. So it's not just the football players and the basketball players, it's everyone. It's the women's volleyball players, it's the lacrosse players, it's the soccer players, it's the golf players. Like it's really, it's everyone. And going back into the women's sports kind of area, it's helping women's college athletes a lot. it's enhanced their attention, and they're very more women's female athletes are on social media and doing the content creator stuff, and so it's bringing more awareness to them. It's bringing fans to their social media to like them as players, but also as people. And I think it's just all around really benefiting a lot of different athletes. I think it's benefiting programs. I read something that more athletes are opting to stay in school and come back for another year instead of declaring for the draft, because they're able to make money in college, which was not, you weren't able to do that before. You had to wait until you got to the NFL to start making money. So I think all around, I know the NCAA might not be happy about it because it might be taking some revenue from them, but I think it brings more attention to their athletes. People might see them on social media who aren't sports fans and now like them and now want to watch their games. So it's increased viewership. I think all around, it's definitely a beneficial thing. And like you said, with my time at Georgetown, that's when it all kind of started coming out and being legalized. And my boss there, my mentor, Vaughn Moss, who's now at Temple, he was just really awesome and way ahead of everyone with trying to bring NIL in to Georgetown and educate the athletes about their personal brands, and that their personal brands are so important. Like, watch what you put on social media. Like, you want to be this certain kind of persona when you're with these brands, when you're representing them. So just kind of giving tips and tricks of what you can do as college athletes to build your personal brand. And he was really influential at Georgetown, I think, coming in and trying to help the athletes start all that.
I love that. Yeah, no, it's ironic that, you're talking about how, and it's a great statistic, that more student athletes are staying in college, which has been a huge problem for the NCAA, specifically in sports, that you have to, you can leave early to declare for. I did a capstone paper myself on the one and done rule in basketball,
Okay.
and the pros and cons of it, but mostly it is truly because athletes risk injury continuing to play in college. And if they do, they won't get those big contracts. They won't get paid. There is no money for their services. And
Right.
now that they can do that in college, it's a great point. The NCAA product is going to improve if more of their top athletes are staying in school and playing for the NCAA, playing for March Madness, playing for championships. And that's just basketball. I mean, this is across the board. And the NCAA has been kind of vehemently against these new things coming up. At least, I mean, that's news. That's not my opinion. That's
Right.
statements that they make, that this is going to ruin sports, and it hasn't. So, why do you think that, or what do you, number one, why do you think that has been their stance, and number two, like, how do you think, what is it going to take for them to kind of accept this as the new norm and see that it is a beneficial new change for their product?
I think a big reason why they're so hesitant and why they're so against this, I think it just has to come down to the legislation. I think it's state by state.
Yeah.
It has to be introduced. So I think that's really just kind of the headache of it all, is figuring out the legislation and getting it passed and keeping track and like making sure everything is legal and what's going on in each state. I think that's the biggest thing, is them, one, not wanting to lose revenue, but two, then now having to go and make sure each state is following the legislation in place and the rules in place for NIL. I think the only thing that's going to change their mind is to show that more viewership's coming of this, more money's coming of this, that fans are falling in love with the players and wanting to see them play on Saturdays or Sundays or whatever it is, or at March Madness. I think it's really going to be the numbers and the data that comes back over the next couple of years that say, yeah, NIL helped college sports. It did not hurt it. And I think that'll be the main decision for them.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's resistant to change, especially
Right.
when that change means less money in your pocket. But I'm very interested in seeing where NIL continues to go, because as we talked about, this is not even 5 years old.
Right.
We have a very small sample size of what name, image, and likeness legislation is doing for college athletics, but so far the return is good, for everyone associated with it. Brands get great ambassadors that young people love, and with the rise of social media, young people are becoming more entrenched in, what is this brand doing that I like? It's
Right.
less about the product and more about who you are as a brand. So aligning yourself with young people is great for marketing. The athletes themselves are benefiting from it. And it seems like so are the schools and the NCAA at large. So I'm sure there's cons of it too, but from my perspective and from what you're saying, it really seems like this is a pro.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of NIL. I'm happy that these college athletes are finally getting compensated for their hard work and for these universities kind of being able to profit off of their skill and their talent. So big supporter of it, and I hope it does well.
It's the future. So, especially for young professionals, this is definitely a space that you should learn something about because
Absolutely.
it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Hailey, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me on my second episode of Role Players. It's been a lot of fun. I am very appreciative of your time. And I believe the Hawks play the Suns next week, February 1st. Maybe not next week, week after. Yeah.
No, I think you might be
So,
right.
so hey, we're friends here. Maybe on February 1st we won't be, but that's okay.
A little friendly competition never hurts. But thank you for
Never.
having me. I really appreciated the discussions, and I hope this is interesting to the viewers.
Yes, I think it will be. So thank you so much. Your perspective is great. And I look forward to more conversations with you.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Well, y'all, that's all we got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you to Hailey for a really great, impactful conversation. I feel like we got into a lot of topics that go outside the line. So thank you, Hailey. We appreciate it. If you liked my conversation with Hailey and want to hear more podcasts, we've got episode 1 with Nicole McClinton and episode 3 coming out next week with our friend Zach Yonker from the Milwaukee Bucks. So tune into that one. If you like the show, please feel free to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want. I would love to hear more about what my fans and listeners think about the show and any future suggestions about, anything that the show has going on. Please, I really appreciate the feedback and the commentary. And final thing, if you or someone would love to be on this podcast, I'm definitely looking for more people to interview. This show is really only as good as its guests because, I'm only me. So I look forward to having more conversations with some amazing people. So feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram, and I would love to get in contact with you. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Looking forward to seeing you all again next Tuesday. Peace.